and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia Vigilantes, the anime series. In this week, we're reviewing the episode titled Farewell Part, and we kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives and the headline positives, the big things I'm discussing over the course of this review. The action was well done for how short it was. I liked how it was able to balance humour as well as setting the stakes. I think it did that very well, and I like the fact that it didn't get lost in the busy work of planning this event. Two things before we kick off the review. First of all, thank you for everyone who liked and subscribed to the channel from the previous video. Always appreciated, always thank you. Hopefully we can hit 200 subscribers by the end of the year, but we'll soon see about that. And as far as this review itself is concerned, forgive me if it feels as though some of the points of praise feel a little bit... They don't feel as though it's given the episode its due credit. I did like this one, it's just that I think that with an episode like this, the biggest hindrance that it has, and not to get into the negatives prematurely, is that this is the first episode of a storyline. As such, the episode itself is mostly going to be doing setup, rather than doing a lot of payoff, which is understandable, but there is still some good payoff in this episode, which we're going to discuss. Now, I do feel as though the action in this episode was done very well for how short that it was. This is an action sequence which in the manga is well put together, but it doesn't really feel like much of a muchness, despite the fact that this is a very important moment in the life of Captain Celebrity. This is, as far as they're concerned at this moment in the story, their last big hurrah in Japan, and it's a moment where their priorities in life change. This is a good episode to show how the character of Captain Celebrity has grown in his time in Japan, and how his priorities and how he's seeing the world is changing. And the action sequence itself feels like it is mostly the culmination of that, or the beginning of the culmination of that character arc for him. So I always felt weird to me that the action sequence in the manga didn't feel more spectacular for what it was, because it shouldn't be, and it really isn't a throwaway one. Here it isn't throwaway. Even as short as it is, there's still this great sense of peril, scale, and heft to it. That massive explosion that happens when the big bomb monster blows up is just brilliant. I just love the effect of just this fearsome, fiery ferocity that comes out of that is really awe-inspiring for what little bit it is, and it helps to really illustrate just how powerful a creature like that is, so that when you have the scarred man, the delivery man, as I like to call him at this point in the story, talking about how he's going to be making more of these things, and well, if he can resist one of them, let's see what 3 or 4 can do. So then it ends up adding this extra sense of peril as to what's going to end up coming next. That action sequence, while short as it was, is the kind of classic superhero action that I love, and to be honest, I don't think we see enough of. I think it's kind of sad that with a lot of superhero fiction, whether it is anime, manga, comic book, or cartoon, we don't see a lot of superheroes just saving people. It's increasingly just these increasingly epic battles between characters, between monsters, between heroes and villains, and just the simple thing of this person's in peril, they need to be saved. I think it's getting lost, and when it is done, it's mostly done for the sake of a montage moment, rather than something like this, where it is a key part in the episode, and it helps to show how the character of Captain Celebrity is growing, and you can start to see the formation of a different point of view for him. Because after that action sequence concludes, we have the thing of him being, no, don't take pictures of me, I look terrible, don't take pictures of me, I look awful. And then the realisation that, and I suppose this is something that's settled in his mind, that people want to see him struggle, people want to see him putting the effort in and going out of his way to be a hero. We don't really get much into an idea as to how Japan at this moment in history is responding to him as a hero. As far as we know, he is decently popular, but you've got to bear in mind that this is still a guy that spends most of his time doing promotional work for a local supermarket, so he's probably not on All Might levels, but he's still a neat figure to have around. However, this is an opportunity for him to show that there's more to him than being a celebrity. There's more to him than just this ball of controversies that's forced him into exile into Japan. He's taken this opportunity to actually be a hero and to put himself on the line, to put his body on the line to save these 3 little girls who, I said it at the time in the manga and I'll say it now, I don't think they should be sent home alone in a bloody back of a taxi, but hey, that's what they've done with this one, and hey ho, it turns out there was a bigger threat in all of that, which was a big scary monster, but nonetheless, it shows Captain Celebrity being more of the hero than we've necessarily seen him before. In any other action sequence we've seen a Captain Celebrity up until this moment, he's been able to do it effortlessly. He's taken it all in his stride and done it with flair and panache, but there seems more emphasis on the flair and panache, more so than him saving the day. And I think that this is an opportunity, like I say, to show that there's more to the character and to make him see that there's more to being a hero than just the flash and the spectacle and the celebrity of it all. We do learn prior to that about the matter of him being able to return to America, that a lot of the court cases and a lot of the controversy surrounding him is cooked. It is created by media, by paparazzi, by people wanting to blackmail and exploit him. Which, on the one hand, is an interesting element to throw into all of this, but on the other hand, it does feel like trying to just totally recontextualize and change the character. Like, a thing that I did like about this character when they were first introduced is the fact that they are in Japan because they are a screw-up. They have managed to find themselves into countless controversies a lot of their own making, so here they are trying to make anew of themselves, improve themselves, or at the very least avoid as much controversies they can do to keep being a hero and to keep being a celebrity. Now they're saying that that stuff doesn't matter and a lot of it is cooked, though how much of it is or isn't I don't know, but whatever. Well, I mean, this is the moment in the story where he's effectively getting written out one way or another, so we need to make sure his plate is as clean as possible for when he returns. I understand that, not going to rag on the episode for that, and I think that the whole circumstance, that whole scene where they're talking about how it's fine for him to go back, it's fine for him to go back to America, and the look of almost regret in his eyes that he has to go back now, that he's started to like this little life he's carved out for himself, that yes, whilst he is Captain Celebrity, he's maybe not the celebrity that he is in America, and he's just doing a lot of this local small town stuff, and maybe as far as he's concerned, he's probably more interested in that than being the big name hero in America, or one of the big name heroes in America, and that's an aspect of the character. It'll be interesting to see how well or not they end up developing on that going forward. I know what they've done in the manga because I've read it, but I'm interested to see how it's put together and how it's presented as far as the anime itself is concerned. And I think a lot of the humour within this episode is presented well. It's fun, it's enjoyable. I can't really praise it or condemn it one way or the other because it's functional. But the thing that works for me about it is the fact that none of that humour, as I've said in previous episodes and previous reviews, feels as though it's undermining the state of affairs. It doesn't feel like anything that's happening here is making anything feel less scary or less important or less tense. This is an episode that starts off light and bouncy. It starts out with Christmas stuff because once again with the My Hero Academia series we have a Christmas special that doesn't happen anywhere near Christmas. Hooray! Don't worry, I'm not going to be doing some kind of Christmas special based upon this episode in any case, but nonetheless you start out with something bright and fun and bouncy with some fun and silly moments. There is the gag about the three little girls being creeped out by Captain Celebrity. I guess they thought that he was going to kidnap them or something, and that's fun, that's cute, and all that stuff is goofy, silly fun. It's not quite as goofy, silly fun as I'm used to with this series, but nonetheless, it works very well, and it ends up creating a fun moment for all of this, and that then goes into what we have in the mid part of the episode, where we have this action sequence, and with the delivery man theorising on how Captain Celebrity's quirk works and how he can exploit that to kill him at some point that is the most convenient for him. And that whole state of affairs does not feel like it's being undermined by what became before it. I do feel as though what comes after it, whilst it does not undermine it, it does feel as though it doesn't quite work. I'm not going to go into negatives quite yet, but to go from the big shock reveal of, oh, our villain has just figured out how our superhero's power works, and they know how to exploit that. That feels like it should be more of like the big cliffhanger thing for the end of the episode, more than it should be the midway point. Hell, I would have been more willing to accept it had this been the thing that happened before the ad break, but I don't see where the ad break is in this episode, unless I blinked and missed the bumpers. I don't think there was one carved into this episode, but nonetheless, I think this is another one of those cases where this is two separate episodes. Well, It isn't. It's several different episodes can't put together, but I do think it does that stuff well. It doesn't feel quite as chop and change as a previous episode in this season, but it does feel as though this is a feature-complete unit, that there's enough here that it ends up making it compelling and interesting, but it doesn't take away anything that's happening around it. Whilst this is obviously 7 different chapters from the manga put together, it doesn't feel like, oh, this was one episode, and this was the other episode, and this is the other episode, and this is the upper episode, as this could easily have been. Yes, there is that moment midway through the episode where we have Midnight getting the flash drive of all the information from what Crawler and Popstep have been gathering over the past few months, which, yeah, I'll be honest with you, feels weird. Like, for the longest time in this series, these two characters just feel like they've just been kind of bungling about, not really paying attention to stuff, and all of a sudden they have all this information written down on a flash drive. Now, it's entirely possible that Eraserhead just said something to Crawler in off-screen about, hey, you know all that stuff you've been doing, maybe you should write it down so I can pass it on to someone else and give you a little bit of cover. It would have been nice to see that and a equivalency of that, but nonetheless, the whole scene, it works well. There is a good humour moment where Crawler does the whole thing. He does the thing that you see in countless comic books where our lead character is a masked vigilante and that someone's talking about how great the vigilante character is, and they're like, oh boy, yeah, that masked marvel, they sure are the coolest guy around. If only I could be like that. Which, I do like the comment that one of the recycle hoppers says something like, yeah, either be humble or play dumb, don't do both lanes at the same time. Pick a lane, that's what he ends up saying under his breath. And I do like the fact that, and also the fact that Midnight seems to be playing along, or just didn't pay attention to the crap that Crawler was saying, because it's obvious that these two are the people in the video. It's obvious. Anyone can see that, and Midnight herself just ultimately comes up and says, oh yeah, this stuff is fine, this is just helping out, this isn't breaking the law, this isn't them doing anything especially bad, and they seem to, as far as the legal side is concerned, they're drawing a line under the stuff they did with KnuckleDuster, with the stuff they've done post-KnuckleDuster, which, it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea, and I'd be interested to see how that feels. Okay, I'm not going to say anything, because this is speculative, and it's one of those speculative things that it could end up becoming true. So I'm not going to say exactly what I'm wanting to say, but it feels as though, and this is more of a general point I should say for the series as a whole, that it feels like Vigilantes, by this point, from what I've read thus far, is where it's pivoting away from the characters being vigilantes and being more like freelance sidekicks and freelance superheroes. And I'm imagining that at some point you could end up having a scene where Crawler and KnuckleDuster meet up again, and KnuckleDuster isn't happy at the fact that Crawler has, for want of a better phrase, sold out, that he's more part of the hero machine than he was before, and he's having to comply with hero practices and hero regulations in a way that vigilantes don't. Whether or not that will end up happening, I don't know, but it ends up feeling as though it's an interesting argument to make, because, let's be honest, like I say, these characters aren't really vigilantes anymore. They've been working more so in events management and promotions than they have vigilante stuff, but even then, they've been acting more like freelance sidekicks than anything else, which is an interesting way to go about this, I have to say. So we'll end up seeing where that ends up going in the long term of it. Again, I just find it's just that small line of, oh, it's not exactly what they're saying, and we have to acknowledge, you have to address the elephant in the room, that there are a lot of AI subtitles floating around, but I think this is something that also is mentioned in the manga. I've not had a chance to double check it, where you have Midnight saying, effectively, we are going to draw a line under the stuff that you did with the old guy, and we're just going to focus on the stuff you've done since then, and the stuff that you've done since then is perfectly fine and okay. You know, you're not an accessory to anything. And it'd be interesting to see where that ends up going as far as the detective's investigation into them is concerned, because now you have a pro-hero, one of the most famous in Japan, say, oh yeah, these guys are alright, they just happen to be in the wrong place at the right time, so there you go. So we'll see where it then ends up going. Now, my final point of praise, and I admit that this ends up feeling like a very me thing, but I feel that it needs to be said, and that point is the fact that I am happy that this episode didn't get lost in the busy work of them planning this event. Now, if you've read, or rather you've watched my reviews of this series, whether that the manga or this series itself, and even the main series in certain moments, for whatever reason, there's just this part of my brain that just really enjoys seeing these meetings, where they have these meetings where they discuss what they're going to do, and how they're going to do it, and all the plans, and all how they're going to do this thing, and how they're going to do that thing. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's some kind of just part of my brain that just broke from when I was in university or something, but hey, that's a part of me that I like. But with an episode like this, you can't get into that. I mean, sure, you can't get into it in general because the vast majority of people are going to find it bloody boring, but nonetheless, you can't have an episode where a lot of it is just, we're going to do this thing, we're going to do that thing. And even beyond that, you can't have an episode where, like, in this episode we do have the montage, which I'll discuss later on, which I enjoy it for what it is. It is humorous, but you couldn't have done that for too long. You can't show too much of them having, even just in the montage of them, calling people up and agreeing this thing and agreeing that thing and trying to get this person and that person and that person. You need to have more going on beyond that. You need to have them where they're trying to get this, well, like they're doing, they want to get All Might, but they don't know how to get him. They want to get that sorted. Or also the thing of, oh, Captain Celebrity's doing really, really well. His popularity is soaring. We should get more merchandise. That stuff's fun as a gag, but you could easily see a scenario where that stuff is just done too long, and I'm glad they didn't. They focused on what was important with this episode, which is setting up for what's coming next, but doing it in a way which feels effective and doesn't feel like it's getting lost too much in the busy work of all of this, which easily could have done. Like, you could easily had some gag moments of them trying to book certain events and book certain characters, and they keep it to a short little montage, which I think works well. With that said, however, we need to get into the negatives, and I have to say that this isn't the biggest negative in the world, but for me, as someone who's a fan of this series, both the main series and this series, it is a disappointment to me that I can't help but mention, which is the fact that, look, this is a prequel series. It's set a number of years before the main series. I'm not entirely sure how long. I think it's maybe close to 5 or 6 years. I'm not 100% sure. And the big issue that I have is that, and again, as far as big issues are concerned, this is a small one, but this is set a number of years before the main series, yet all our heroes, all our pro-heroes, look exactly the same as they do in the main series. This is something that bugged me about it in the manga, and it's something that bugs me now. Like, you're not going to have radical changes with the designs and costumes of some of the characters, but it does feel as though with some of them that maybe this was an opportunity where you could have shown that they had a different costume in this time period. They had different costumes, they had different equipment with them in that particular moment in history. They had different items, they had a different costume, they had a different gimmick as far as their thing is concerned. But you don't get that. Everyone just looks pretty much the exact same. The only character of the main cast from the main series in Vigilantes who looks any different is Fat Gum. They made a conscious effort in designing him for this particular series to make his costume slightly different so that it would emphasise that this is an earlier version of him. He has far more of like the padding and armour on him, even though it's just like shin pads and elbow pads and such, and that works for the character. It gives you a sense that this is a character from a different point in their career, but no one else is like that. Everyone looks the same. And it's also the fact that all these characters are characters from the main series. It would have been great to see characters that were only really popular in this time period, rather than just going, okay, what designs do we have on file? Well, we can have this character, we can have this character, and we can have this character. It would have been nice to just see more of it, just see other designs and other characters. And even then, if you are going to use characters from the main series, why not use characters that weren't really used all that much? Like, in an earlier episode in this season, there is that poster of the hero that was tasked with making sure that Overhaul was sent to prison, but they ended up getting offed by the League of Villains. You could have had them. Like, they could have, as far as we're concerned, they were kind of a big name at this point in history anyway, so, you know, maybe we could have done something there, used them to show that, yeah, they were a big deal, so that when you go back and watch that, they weren't just some guy. They weren't just some guy that was there to just get jobbed. They were a hero that was sent there because they have something to give. And I remember reading in, like, the behind-the-scenes stuff for the manga that there were some other heroes that they wanted to get involved in it, but they just didn't have time to draw them. There's that one that looks like the really old samurai guy, that he's one of the first people to give up being a hero in the main series. Like, you could have used him as one of them, you could have used other heroes, but that's not what they did, and that's a disappointment. And certain character designs, it would have been interesting to see them at an earlier point in their life, but we don't get that, which is a shame. So, not a massive issue, but it does feel like a missed opportunity to be creative, especially bearing in mind that we did something similar with Izuku Midoriya's mum in the previous season. We showed her younger than she's depicted in the manga, so it makes it clear that this is definitely set in the past, that this isn't some kind of prequel by virtue of a few months or a sequel series. And it is a shame that we don't have anything left. Even just that level of creativity doesn't seem to be here, but that's a discussion for when we get to the review in a few weeks' time for the series as a whole, or rather the season as a whole. With that said and done, however, let's get into the overview and say that I think this is a good, solid episode. If it does suffer, it suffers because of the fact that this is the first episode in a storyline. As such, it's a lot of setup, not a lot of payoff. I do like what we see. I think the action works well for what it is. I think the humour works well for what it needs to be, and make sure that it's able to pace itself very well. I do wish that more could have been done with the hero designs, however, but that's a minor issue. With all that said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, reading comments from the previous video. I don't know why I do this song, but nonetheless, it is Big X1 from the previous video who says, best episode of Vigilantes ever. Thank you for your comment, and honestly, it probably was. And I know that sounds kind of dismissive and not that convinced, but so far, certainly as far as the anime is concerned, that is definitely the best one we've had thus far. I think about it worked so bloody well in a way that I don't think any other episode of this series thus far has been able to do. I suppose the closest we could have come is with the fight between B and KnuckleDuster, but I don't think that had the necessary level of emotional impact it should have done, but that comes down to the fact I think that first season runs too quickly, and an argument to be said, this season runs too quickly, but that's a whole other matter. Let me know what you thought about this particular episode in the comment section down below. Let me know if you loved it, let me know if you ever hated it. Be sure to do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, like, subscribe, and do all that kind of stuff. Thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!